There's a kind of loneliness that has nothing to do with being alone. You can be surrounded by people, speak to dozens every day, and still feel that invisible hollow swallowing you from the inside. It's a silent emptiness, an echo that answers whenever the soul whispers, "Does anyone truly see me?" For years I tried to fill it, with work, with people, with noise. I thought loneliness was a mistake, something to be fixed, a disease to be cured. I couldn't stand silence, because in silence I met the truth. I didn't know who I was without others. Loneliness, that word we fear so much, began to chase me at the strangest times. While laughing with friends, while scrolling endlessly through social media, while drowning music in my ears. It followed me like a shadow stitched to my heart. Until one day, I realized it wasn't loneliness chasing me. It was my soul calling my name. That day, something broke. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I felt disconnected, from people, from purpose, even from God. I prayed, but my words fell flat. I opened the Bible, but the letters had no life. Again and again I asked, "Where are you, Lord?" The only answer was silence. And that silence hurt more than any word. So for the first time, I stopped running. I sat down with my loneliness like sitting across from an enemy I could no longer avoid. I didn't speak. I just breathed. And in that stillness, I understood something I'd never known. Loneliness wasn't my enemy. It was my teacher. It hadn't come to punish me. It came to reveal me. It was a mirror forcing me to look without masks, without distractions, without anyone's approval. For the first time, I saw myself as I was. Fragile, insecure, yet profoundly human. And somewhere between fear and honesty, something unexpected appeared. The presence of God. It wasn't a vision, nor a voice, but a quiet certainty, soft and deep. He was there. Not in the words, but in the silence. Not in the crowd, but in the stillness. It was as if he whispered, "You are not alone. I've been waiting here, right where you finally dared to be yourself." That moment broke me and healed me all at once. I cried, not from sorrow, but relief. I realized God doesn't shout above the noise. He whispers in the silence of the soul. And loneliness, the one we fear, is often where his voice becomes the clearest. From that day, I saw loneliness differently, not as an emptiness to escape, but as sacred ground, the meeting place between me and him. But reaching that place wasn't easy. It required stillness, courage, and the willingness to sit with my shadows. True healing doesn't begin when someone joins you. It begins when you learn to sit with yourself, in God's presence. That night I closed my eyes and understood. The pain of loneliness isn't a curse. It's an invitation, a doorway to a love that doesn't depend on anyone else. A love born from the Creator himself. And it was there, in the place I feared most, that healing began. Because only when the soul grows silent can it hear what's been there all along. You were never truly alone, only distracted. Discovering where loneliness comes from was like opening an old, torn book. Each page told a story, disappointments, broken promises, loves that never stayed. At first, I blamed others, but I learned the truth. Loneliness begins the day we disconnect from ourselves. We live buried in noise, always running, always filling the void with more. But noise only hides the deeper wound, the forgotten soul. When the soul is ignored, it starts to scream in silence. That scream is loneliness. I remembered moments surrounded by laughter where something inside me quietly cried. My body was present, but my heart was missing. The most painful loneliness isn't the absence of others, it's being absent from yourself. Slowly, God showed me the real root. I'd been chasing approval, trying to be enough for everyone but him. I looked for love that fills only the space he can occupy. Loneliness disguised itself in many forms: success, independence, even superficial faith. I realized many of my prayers weren't true conversation. They were attempts to silence anxiety. But God, in his patience, didn't scold me. He simply waited for my noise to quiet so he could finally speak. One afternoon, I stopped before a still pond. Falling leaves rippled across the water, and there I saw my reflection. Not the usual one, but the tired one. The one longing for rest. And I heard a soft, almost maternal whisper within. "You're not broken. You've just been looking in the wrong places." That phrase changed everything. Loneliness wasn't failure. It was a signal. A signal that my soul was asking to reconnect. With life, with truth, with God. Its pain was really heaven calling. Come home. From then on, I paid attention. Whenever I felt alone, I didn't reach for distraction. I listened. Silence, I discovered, has its own language, and God speaks it fluently. The emptiness I'd feared became a temple. Inside it, I could hear the thoughts I'd avoided, the fears I'd buried, the truths I needed. Loneliness, when embraced, becomes prayer. Healing didn't come in a flash. It was a long, quiet journey, full of pauses and tears. It required honesty, not enthusiasm. To heal, I had to face wounds I had ignored, words that scarred, absences that ached, mistakes that still whispered. I had to remove the armor of pride and meet the inner child who only ever wanted love. One night, I felt I needed to forgive myself, not as weakness, but as worship. I'd been too harsh with my humanity. My voice trembled as I prayed, "Forgive me for not believing I was worthy of your love." Something in me broke again, this time to release. Tears came, not as despair, but cleansing. And I knew God wasn't just hearing me. He was crying with me. The following days felt like a retreat. I withdrew from noise, even from some people. Not from rejection, but from renewal. Loneliness, when lived consciously, becomes communion. And in that sacred quiet, I heard the soul whisper, "Stop running. Stop punishing yourself. You're coming home." I learned forgiveness, for myself, and for those who hurt me. Not because they deserved it, but because I needed freedom. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It transforms the weight of memory. Where bitterness once grew, compassion began to bloom. Reading again the story of the prodigal son, I saw something new. Not the son returning, but the father waiting. God doesn't rush, demand, or reproach. He simply waits until the soul grows tired of running. And when it finally turns back, he doesn't scold. He runs to embrace. That image stayed with me, the father running, arms open. For years I'd tried to earn his love, when all along that love had been chasing me. It wasn't about finding him. It was about letting him find me. Over time, loneliness began to change shape. It didn't vanish. It transformed. Moments of silence remained, but they were no longer voids. They were sacred spaces. I started enjoying my own company, walking without headphones, praying without words. It felt like peace, quiet, deep, real. Healing the soul, I discovered, doesn't mean eliminating loneliness. It means inhabiting it with love. Loneliness can become a garden if you learn to plant there, and what grows from that silent soil bears fruit, patience, compassion, gratitude. Looking back, I saw how many times God had tried to reach me during what I called his absence, in a kind word, in a song that arrived just in time. In strength I didn't know I had. His presence was always between the lines. I just didn't know how to read it. Healing isn't linear, it's circular. The soul revisits pain not to regress, but to cleanse deeper. Each cycle of ache and comfort drew me closer to him. More human, more whole. One night I whispered under the stars, "Thank you for not leaving me, even when I mistook you for loneliness." Peace flooded me. Stillness, but alive. No voices, no signs, just presence. And I finally understood. Loneliness doesn't end when someone arrives. It ends when God does. When the soul heals, silence changes sound. What once weighed, now holds. What once hurt, now teaches. Loneliness remains, not as enemy, but as friend. It's no longer absence, it's awareness. And in that awareness, I found God. He wasn't only in churches or prayers. He was in the light through my window, in bread baking in the oven, in rain on the roof. The divine hid inside the ordinary, and once I saw it, I could never unsee it. I used to search for God in the extraordinary. Now I find Him in the everyday. A kind word, a deep breath, a quiet joy. God isn't far. He's within, not above, but around. His love isn't something to hunt for, it's something to awaken. And once it awakens, you can never truly feel alone again. I began walking slower, living with intention. Every breath became prayer, every silence, a conversation. I no longer filled the void with noise, I filled it with presence. One morning I watched a tree sway in the wind and remembered when my soul felt like that. Fragile, ready to break. But now, like that tree, my roots were deeper. The wind still blew, but it didn't uproot me. Because once your roots sink into God, no storm can move you. Loneliness, once my cross became my altar. It taught me to listen, truly listen. To God, to others, to myself. I rediscovered dreams, gifts, long-buried parts of me. Silence became revelation. And I realized God's silence isn't absence, it's invitation. He isn't refusing to speak. He's waiting for us to hear. Over time, my prayer changed again. It became pure gratitude. Thank you, Lord, for staying when everyone else left. Thank you for being near even when I called you distant. Thank you for teaching me to see your love everywhere. And as I thanked Him, something beautiful happened. I felt surrounded, even by people no longer here. Because love that comes from God doesn't disappear, it transcends. Loneliness taught me to love without owning, to care without clinging. One afternoon I saw an elderly woman sitting alone on a bench, gazing at nothing. I smiled at her. She smiled back. In that brief exchange I understood everything. Sometimes a single look can remind another soul, you're not alone. I stopped fearing silence in conversation. Presence became more powerful than words. Accompanying someone quietly is its own kind of prayer. Because that's what God did for me. He stayed, in silence, until I could finally hear Him. I learned the cure for loneliness isn't human company, but divine awareness. When you know He dwells within you, the void loses its power. Because it was never truly empty, it was full of Him all along. Now, when loneliness returns, I close my eyes and whisper, "You're here, Lord." And everything realigns. Loneliness doesn't hurt the same way anymore. It's peace now. A sacred reminder that the soul, when quiet, finds itself and finds Him. We are never alone, not even when no one stands beside us, because God chose to dwell within us. That realization changed me. I didn't need to talk as much, explain as much, just be. A healed soul becomes quiet testimony. Its calm becomes prayer. Its presence becomes shelter. Loneliness, once my wound, became my mission. I no longer fear it. I honor it. Because in its depth, I learned the holiest art of all, how to be with God when no one else is near. There comes a moment when looking back no longer hurts, not because the past vanished, but because it's understood. The wound remains, but it no longer bleeds. It becomes a scar, and scars, when seen with gratitude, are maps of grace. I once thought loneliness would be my sentence. Now I know it was my school. It didn't erase my sadness overnight, but it taught me to converse with it. It didn't remove emptiness, but it filled it with meaning. It taught me that silence, lived with faith, becomes music. Today, I can say, without fear, loneliness saved me. It forced me to stop, to listen, to stop seeking God in the spectacular and start seeing Him in the essential. In the air I breathe, in the bread I break, in the people I love, in the quiet I once feared. We are all called to walk through some kind of loneliness, not as punishment, but as right. It's in isolation that seeds germinate, in darkness that faith strengthens, in silence that the soul learns the language of the Creator. No one leaves that encounter unchanged, because whoever has felt God in their loneliness can never again feel completely alone. Healing doesn't mean pain vanishes. It means pain no longer has the final word. Fear becomes wisdom. Emptiness becomes creation. God's love doesn't promise a life without suffering. It promises that nothing, absolutely nothing, can separate us from His presence. Sometimes I close my eyes and see my old self, running, desperate, chasing comfort in all the wrong places. I smile at Him now gently, because even that was part of grace. God never scolded my escapes. He just waited, patiently, until I stopped running. And when I did, I found Him there. Not with reproach, but with tenderness. Now when someone says, I feel completely alone, I don't offer cliches. I just tell them the truth I found. You don't defeat loneliness, you walk through it. And you don't walk through it alone. He walks with you. I'm convinced God doesn't erase our shadows. He teaches us to see clearly within them. Faith isn't avoiding darkness. It's walking through it, knowing there's a light inside that never dies. That light, once lost, now burns in me, soft but steady. I've learned to bless silence. Some evenings I sit quietly with a cup of coffee and breathe. No words, no explanations, just presence. And I realize there's no distance between the human and the divine, only awareness. Everyone carries a desert within. Some call it loneliness, others exhaustion. But every desert has one door: hope. Hope isn't emotion, it's choice. It's believing there's something beyond pain, even when unseen. It's trusting God is still writing, even when the page looks blank. So when my soul aches again, I no longer see regression. I see reminder, a gentle whisper, come back to me, and I return to silence, not as prisoner, but as guest. Loneliness, once my breaking, is now where I rebuild. There I speak with God, and with myself. I share my fears, doubts, small victories. I don't look for quick answers, only for His presence, and I always find it. Loneliness heals not by escape, but by love. Because once you learn to be alone with God, you realize you never were alone. The soul, in its purest essence, is always accompanied. So if you ever feel unseen, left behind, forgotten, don't fear. It's not the end. It's the beginning. The beginning of a deeper conversation with the one who made you. Let loneliness lead you inward, to the center where He dwells. There you'll discover the love you've been searching for isn't out there. It's within, waiting. When you find it, everything changes. Not because the world is perfect, but because your eyes are new. Where once you saw emptiness, you now see space. Where once you heard silence, you now hear prayer. Where once you felt absence, you now feel presence. That's the true healing of the soul, realizing nothing can separate you from the love of God. Even in darkness, that love burns, silent, steady, unbreakable. Today, I no longer say the word loneliness with fear. I say it with gratitude. Because it was loneliness that led me home. It was loneliness that showed me God was never distant. He was the heartbeat within my chest. And so this journey ends, not with a goodbye, but with a sigh of peace. The truth is simple, eternal, and tender. Loneliness doesn't destroy the soul. It reveals it. It doesn't take you from God. It brings Him closer. So if ever the silence feels heavy, remember this. Silence isn't empty. It's the space where God whispers your name.